Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
This week we're continuing a short series that we're doing on, boy, this is going to be a mouthful. You ready? The sixth cognitive function energy that's associated with the archetype of the witch cynics in our personalities.
Yep, specifically for career.
Specifically for career. I forgot that part. What in the world did I just mean by what I said, Antonia?
I don't know.
Land it for the layman or the layperson. What did I just say? That was a lot of marbles and nonsense.
Yeah, that was a lot. So in the last episode, we laid the groundwork that argued for a case for why we would want to integrate.
Well, this is going better than what I said. This is good. Keep going. I like it.
Integrate our sixth cognitive function, our sixth function, and our personality type specifically for careers.
Dang, that was so much better than I said.
No, it wasn't.
That was so much better.
Yes, but yours was faster, which is always better. So if you want to understand what we mean by that, I highly recommend going back to the first episode in this series just last week and hear that case. We describe and explain what the sixth function is, how to figure out what it is for your personality type.
Yeah.
And we also talked about how it includes some of that energy, that what Dr. John Beebe calls the archetypal energy of the witch and the Senex.
Okay, so two things. I'm going to talk about how to reverse engineer and find out what this is for you, because we are going to get to specific types today.
Yes.
So someone listening might be like, well, I wish you told me how to find what mine is so I could follow along. And then I'd like you to talk about just a few of the qualitative nature of this, just, the sixth function in general, archetypical energy, just so somebody has a few notes in case they didn't want to go and listen to the whole thing just to follow along today.
I'll give the cliff notes of the first episode.
So I'll just say this. There's a whole bunch of reason why we gave the math on the last episode. But basically, if you want to know what we typically talk about just the first four functions here at Personality Hacker.
We call it the car model.
The car model.
That's right.
But today we're going to dip into the back functions, the shadow functions deeper down in. And we're going to talk about the sixth cognitive function. We usually just stick with 1 through 4. We're going to talk about number 6 today. And how you can figure out what your cognitive function is at the sixth position is look at your second position. So the auxiliary or co-pilot function, whatever that is for you, all you have to do is reverse its attitude and you can immediately know what your sixth function is. So for me, as an example, I used this last week as well, ENFP preferences. My co-pilot or auxiliary cognitive function as an ENFP is technically called introverted feeling. We call it authenticity here at Personality Hacker. So introverted feeling. To know what my sixth function is, I just have to take the introverted part and make that extroverted. So my sixth function is extroverted feeling, or what we call harmony here at Personality Hacker. You, Antonia, have ENTP preferences. ENTP preferences. I don't know why I'm slurring my words. I think I'm tired. Accuracy is your co-pilot or auxiliary energy. Introverted thinking is the technical name. So we take the introverted and we flip it to extroverted. So your sixth function would be extroverted thinking or effectiveness.
That's right. So attitude is basically just the direction the function is facing or going. And as you just mentioned, we both have introverted. Our second function or auxiliary functions are both introverted. So all we do is we point it the other direction, and now we've got our sixth function.
Yeah.
So thank you for laying that. And we also talked about in that first episode that we are actually always using our sixth function. We are probably already using it in career, like just without realizing it. What we're advocating for is to not start using it in career, but to integrate it and to use career as an opportunity to do that. It's very powerful. So what is integrating? Integrating is recognizing that this is a part of you. It's seeing and acknowledging how you're already using it and how it's already showing up for you. It's influencing how it shows up as opposed to just simply being influenced. And it's listening instead of being dominated by it. So the witch or Senex energy is kind of a domineering energy just to begin with. It is associated with authority. It's associated with sort of Dr. John Beebe calls it a withering authority. And there are certain aspects that it brings that, it's already quite assertive. If we don't recognize how it's showing up in us, sometimes we can turn that on ourselves or others, and it can get pretty critical. So some of the characteristics that we benefit when we don't integrate it, it usually is undermining us. When we do integrate it, it supports us. And so some of the characteristics or qualities that we talked about in the last episode is that it helps with boundary setting and limitations or limits. When we use this function to help us set good boundaries in career, it means that we don't get exploited and we don't exploit others, which is good. It helps us find that Goldilocks of like, how much do we give? How much do we receive? And this is actually pretty good, not just in whether or not we're working a ton of overtime and we shouldn't, or whether or not we're asking, our boss for the raise, but it's also good in situations where maybe we're trying to make a deal with someone and we need to have that discretion in boundaries to be able to set a good deal that's a win-win. It also shows up as a critical eye, which exposes weakness. It exposes inconsistencies and falsehoods, which again is really good in a business context. A lot of people end up playing zero-sum games in business, and this is the part that helps us assess what we're getting into, and whether or not we're doing good work. It also taps into having high standards and a sense of excellence and integrity. So this is important for us to want to be excellent, but if we don't integrate it, then it can turn into perfectionism. So we want to make sure that we're not being dominated by the energy and beating ourselves up for being perfectionist. And as we mentioned in the last episode, there are a lot of things that can turn us into perfectionists, not just our sixth function. But if you tried everything else and you still seem to have it, then it might be this energy that needs a little bit more integration.
Yeah.
And then finally, accountability. And that's also related to integrity. This is the part of us that can help us have a better experience by understanding how we're accountable, not just to the tasks of our job, but also to the output of our job. And when we really integrate this part of who we are, we find ourselves more spiritually and psychologically rewarded by our work. But if we're dominated by it, we're going to feel the exact opposite. We're going to feel like we're never good enough. We're going to feel beaten down. We're going to kind of hate ourselves and everybody else around us. We might hate our job. And we can actually become exploitative of others as well.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the premise of the ground that we laid in the first episode.
Today we're going to go through the 4 perceiving functions in the Myers-Briggs system that are associated with this energy. And before we get into this specifically, we're going to go through all the types that embody these functions. Remember, and we talked about this in the last episode, we don't want to spend too much time on it, but the archetypical energy of the witch cynics is not the same thing as the cognitive function that you have in your personality associated with that energy.
Right.
Those are 2 separate things. We do a lot of work around this in our personality life path mentorship.
Yeah, don't conflate them and say they're the same.
They're not the same thing. So as we start to talk about, we're going to talk about the ISPs next. When you start to hear this, don't think that your function of introverted sensing or memory is archetypically witch cynics energy. It's that when you go to witch cynics energy, you typically flavor it with the function of introverted sensing or memory.
Right.
If you're at ISP, as an example.
Yep.
So with that said, let's jump into the first set of personality types, the ISPs, the ISTP personality type and the ISFP personality type. Now we're going to the 6th function, the witch cynics energy for both of these personality types, which is introverted sensing. We've nicknamed this function memory. This is where the position is for the ISPs.
Right.
So let's talk about this, Antonia.
Okay.
If you're an ISP, how does this influence you? What are some things to be aware of? How does this show up?
So it's introverted sensing because the second function or the auxiliary function is extroverted sensing or sensation. And one of the reasons why we have a tendency to resist going to our 6th function is because it requires us to use a function that is a preferred function for us, in this case for ISP types, sensing. It requires them to use sensing, but in a different way than they usually do, in a way that's not as fun or interesting. Extroverted sensing or sensation is a more present function. It's a more responsive. to the moment and what's going on around you. It's a lot more aware of its surroundings in a very real-time way, and it tends to respond and react quickly. So that's the preferred way for an ISP type to use sensing, is to be on the spot, to be a little bit more attuned to like getting into action. Introverted sensing or memory is it's a sensing function, so it's still about experiencing, which of course is what extroverted sensing or sensation is all about, is experiencing things in the moment. But it's more about processing. And this is a function that understands sort of distinctions over time. So you're processing these experiences, and you're also attuning to the details of how things used to be versus how they are now. So you're noticing a lot of details of change and how things change over time. So that's going to come up and be very helpful for ISP types in a business context. What it does is it helps ground them a little bit, and it gives them more of a through line of their business experience. It makes it so that things aren't just in the moment, but they might have been able to like lay tracks. It helps them, create a little bit more career capital by staying put in one place, or having sort of watched their career develop over time. So there's a short list of qualities and characteristics that an ISP type can tap into in order to integrate this part of who they are. So basically, it's like doing tasks that honor the sixth function is a part of how one integrates it. Because as you're doing these things, you're going to watch different parts of yourself show up. You're going to watch whether or not you don't like that or find it distasteful or don't want to do that. Or when you do, when you do some of these characteristics or traits, focus on these kinds of tasks, you're going to watch yourself kind of be like, well, that's no fun, or that's not how I want to do it. And you'll find yourself resisting it. So it's good to understand what you're looking for as a benchmark, or some of the characteristics or qualities that can come out, in order to rest into them and then observe how it actually increases your tool set.
That co-pilot for ISPs, extroverted sensing or sensation, is such a fast action taker. It can be such a direct path to action. Like, I see it and I do it. Mm-hmm. It's not really creating a to-do list. It's just like initiation energy. It's like just getting into the action of it. And this is a superpower. Imagine as an ISP, like getting up and getting into action and moving, that generates energy. You get things done, you get them accomplished. And it can be hard to not, like, anytime there's something to do at work or your career, to tune into that energy. Like, why wouldn't you always lean on that? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of environments where direct action is more challenging than what I would call paperwork action, right? Where there's more of a procedure, a process. Maybe you have to interoperate between other people who've come before, other things that have already, existed. And you have to basically take action that's not as direct. Maybe it's more indirect action.
Yeah.
And this sixth function, what I hear you just, well, you haven't said this yet, but you're kind of setting us up for this, and we're getting into some of the details.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, imagine in the work environment, all the times when, oh crap, I forgot to file that thing, or, oh no, I forgot to make sure I was matching the procedure that I was supposed to do to get the other thing done. I took direct action, but I didn't do all the, I'll call it quote unquote paperwork. It can be a challenge because so much of our work is knowledge-based work. Mm-hmm. So much of our work has to be tracked, and we have to, interoperate between so many large departments. Often when you're like at a desk job or things like this, or even if you're in a more active job, there's like paperwork that has to be, maybe you're in nursing, you still have to do a ton of paperwork and keep track of things. This really does give, I think, you in the business world an advantage to be able to tap into this energy.
Yep. Now, I'm glad you said all of that, because it reminded me to say, you're not using this function instead of your second function. You
Absolutely
still want to be using, as an ISP type, you still want to be making sure that you're using extroverted sensing or sensation, if at all possible, in your work. So you already want to be leaning on your strength. You just want to add this to it. So I'm going to read kind of a list of different styles that an ISP type can infuse into their career, which will give them a lot of benefit. The first, you've already alluded to it just now, is process documentation and refinement. So basically it means making sure that you have step-by-step processes for things, making sure that you maintain consistency and reduce errors, because you're not just jumping in the moment, but you're actually kind of tracking things as they go over time, and that you're understanding good ways to onboard and train people. So that's the first one, is use introverted sensing or memory as a sixth function to tap into your ability to sort of maintain consistency. And that goes into quality, which both ISP types care about. They care about the quality of their work, and this helps support high quality work. There's also the ability to draw on past experience for decision making. So sometimes when people have extroverted sensing or sensation, patterning can be difficult because every situation kind of looks like it's own situation. You sort of understand how each experience is different from each other. And so this allows, as opposed to needing to spot a pattern quickly, this allows you to just spot where you've seen it before, right? And then what did we do then? And how did my decision from the past, how did that turn out? As opposed to having to, guess how it's going to happen in the future. How is this decision going to, I'm trying to run a simulation. I'm trying to see how it's going to happen in the future. And I have a little bit of that, but actually maybe the smart play is to just go, when did I do this before? Right. And what happened then? There's also long-term continuity planning. So, this is making sure that you have a mind towards sustainable growth, that you have a mind towards thinking beyond immediate trends. Right, that there's a longer timeline here, and you can see that you can pull a little bit from your introverted intuition or your perspectives, 10-year-old or tertiary, but introverted sensing or memory is right there to help you understand continuity and how these things play out on a longer timeline. There's also an ability to standardize performance metrics. So you have more consistency of performance, more quality control over time. So it's like if you standardize things and make everybody interface with them, then you're not dealing with rogue elements, including yourself. And then finally, having adaptive resilience. One of the things that introverted sensing or memory does is it makes it so that an organization can handle similar issues, like things that they've seen before, especially if they've been sort of hit by, bad time periods. And so what's nice is that if you have contingency plans and you understand that there's a need to be resilient, that you're not just showing up every day kind of expecting it to turn out the same, but it's actually that if you're tracking changes over time, you watch patterns to some extent. Like you watch that you maybe go through feast or famine cycles. Yeah. And those are the kinds of things that really help an ISP to not just deal with the matters of the day, but deal with matters over longer timelines. Yeah,
I like this idea of, I think that ISTPs and ISFPs have a lot of energy, and as they build career capital, they have identity that gets tied to it, right? With accuracy, introverted thinking, or authenticity, introverted feeling, their identity starts to, I'm a performer, I'm a writer, I'm a whatever they do, right? I'm a scientist, whatever their identity can be around. That can be part of building career capital. But what this gives you access to, not just the identity piece of career capital, this gives you, again, I keep calling it the paperwork of career capital. This is like the actual resume with the words on it that say, I did this from this time to this time. Right. I had this job. I had this responsibility. And it's sticking with and capturing and recording what you've done to build a legacy of your work life over time. Because I think ISPs tend to have a lot of energy and they can pivot and move quickly and sometimes maybe not stick with things for long. So this introverted sensing or memory can kind of be the through line for the different careers, the different opportunities, the different jobs you've had. Mm-hmm. It can tie it all together in like a nice timeline, if you will.
Yep. So examples are always my Achilles heel. So in this particular podcast series, I've come prepared.
Oh, good.
I came with examples. Which, if you've ever been in any of our courses in profile training, people are always like, can you give me an example? And I was like, I can't think of one off the top of my head. But in this one, I came prepared.
So there's two types, ISTP and ISFP. That means that we could maybe look at the qualitative nature of the sixth function a little different based on the type.
Yeah.
So if we talked about ISTP, what would that look like? What's an example of an ISTP using this function?
So I've chosen the example of a craft brewer, somebody who maybe brews their own beer, right? Okay. Like a microbrew. And introverted sensing or memory could help in quality control by documenting, like maybe even meticulously documenting every brewing batch. And that means that subtle variations would be tracked and they could refine the process of how they're making it. And by referencing these records, right, the past records and all these subtle variations, the ISTP can ensure product consistency and then also develop a high quality standard that the brewery itself can maintain over time. So introverted sensing or memory would be how they make sure that each batch tastes the same, right? And that actually, as they're tracking it over time, the batch can get better, right? And then they can replicate it the next time.
Because they got a standard.
That's right.
To be able to pivot from.
Exactly.
What about ISFP? How would this maybe look for an ISFP?
Well, an example could be like an ISFP marketing assistant noticing that previous campaigns achieved exceptional results. And so they might go back and look at the elements that contributed to the success of that campaign in the past, and then make sure that those elements are incorporated into whatever campaign they're working on right now. And then that means that that again, you're taking a thing that worked and then ensuring that you are creating a consistency of those elements that ensures a better result. So it's like past referencing, grabbing the stuff that works, and then making sure that that standard or that consistency is imbued into every campaign going forth.
I could imagine ISFP or ISTP right now saying, I hear what you're saying, Antonia, but that sounds awful to have to keep track like that. I'm more the active person. That's for the record keeping department at my work, or my partner or spouse does that for me. I don't do that. I just get into action. I keep things moving.
Right.
And I think about big ideas.
Yep.
So this sounds I'm sure an ISP is listening right now. That sounds like a nightmare. I don't want to do any of this.
Well, and that's the reluctance, right? The reluctance is that it can feel stifling, or it can feel like it's keeping you from taking action. I mean, take for example, the brewer. It's like, well, what if I want to do something different with this, with this particular batch, or what if I want to continue to be like creative, and if I'm now having to, take all these notes and watch the differences and changes, then it's going to limit my ability to kind of be creative with it. And so that's the reluctance. The reluctance is that there is a limitation that's put on it. But remember, that's one of the things that the sixth function does, is it taps into setting limits, right? And good boundaries, understanding where those limits should be set. And when you're trying to have quality control and consistency over time, you're going to have to limit your creativity a little bit, right? You're going to have to do that. So what happens if an ISP doesn't do this? Meaning that what if they are being influenced by this function without their recognition sort of in the back, and they've still made it, keep it disowned. They keep distancing themselves from it for the reason we just mentioned.
Basically not seeing the shadow. Pushing it away, not integrating the shadow part of themselves.
Yep. Well, what it means is a lot of repeated mistakes. That's really what it looks like. It looks like repeating mistakes over and over, being uncertain why, being less effective, missing details, things that are just kind of small but tend to add up over time, and maybe even having to sell yourself on a bit of hubris, right? Like not know whether or not you can handle something, but sell yourself as if you can, and then not be able to handle it because you actually don't have the experience or the history. So it's still showing up, right? This part of you is still coming up, and it might show up as a lot of uncertainty and doubt. It might show up as feeling like when something is not working out for you, that it's other people's fault, but it actually could just be your own lack of consistency. It could be your own lack of attention to detail.
So let's talk about the next cognitive function. When we talk about the sixth energy, this which cynic's energy in the cognitive function stack, number 6. Let's tune into the ENTJ and ENFJ personalities, and let's focus in on the cognitive function of exploration, extroverted intuition. And this is the strength for us EPs, or ENPs, I should say. But for ENFJs and ENTJs, they have this as their which cynic's sixth function. What does this look like? Like, how does this show up for them? And again, we're applying this toward career and business. And so EJ energy often is like in charge of things in the business and career world. I've noticed, and I'm sure you listening right now have noticed, this is a lot of people in charge are EJ energy. So how is this showing up for them? Let's talk about the qualitative nature of extroverted intuition exploration.
Okay. So the second function or the auxiliary or co-pilot is introverted intuition or perspectives. And that's a function that runs simulations and sees from lots of different perspectives, but also tries to vision into the future what's going on or what will be happening. And that's the preferred way that ENJs have for using their intuitive function. But there's extroverted intuition or exploration just sitting right there waiting for them to pay attention to it. And this function can come with a lot of rewards.
Yeah.
Again, it's not going to be the preferred, right? And we'll talk a little bit about some of the reluctance they might experience in it, but it is available to them and is yet another tool.
Jonathan on our team calls this the bully function.
Yes.
He feels like extroverted intuition or exploration is specifically like a bullying energy.
Right.
And I'm like, what? But knowing he's in ENFJ,
Mm-hmm.
that we talked about the qualitative nature of the witch cynic's energy as a withering authority.
Yeah.
That could feel maybe bullying.
Yeah.
Maybe that to him, it's interpreted very like it's like trying to command and control top down, like a bully would.
This is a function that can be very persuasive too.
Yeah.
And it can be like really excitable and exciting. And sometimes it feels like in its desire to come up with a bunch of ideas, that persuasiveness can sound pretty assertive, right? And sometimes even aggressive. That said, this is going to influence ENJs whether they use it or not. But let's talk about ways that they can take hold of it. Again, listen as opposed to be dominated by the energy. The first one is to encourage experimentation. And that means creating a context where they call them safe to fail environments, meaning that there's an ability where you can test new ideas, you can encourage innovation, that you can feel comfortable exploring novel approaches. So that might not feel very good for somebody with ENJ preferences because it might feel like a waste of time or it might feel like a waste in general. And yet that's where the innovation comes from and new trends. So the first one is to encourage innovation and experimentation, encourage throwing spaghetti against a wall as opposed to feeling like it's just going to take. Another one is to see all the different directions you can go as opposed to just one direction you can go. Introverted intuition or perspectives runs a simulation of the most likely sort of outcome. But extroverted intuition or exploration sees all the possible outcomes and all the possible disruptions. And so as opposed to just having a single vision, which is good, it's good to have a single vision and move towards it. It's also good to expand your range a little bit and to also see, well, maybe it won't play out exactly the way that I'm expecting. And if it doesn't play out the way that you're expecting, as opposed to falling apart and being unsure what to do, you already had some contingency plans. You already had some other possible ways that things could have gone down. And so you've already accounted for them. And there's also cross-industry trend spotting. So cross-pollinating with other, sort of business ideas and contexts. There's a tendency for introverted intuition or perspectives to kind of stay in a lane, whereas the exploration function spreads out and then cross-pollinates. And so having an openness to cross-pollinating and bringing in ideas that might be, sort of way outside the box. There's a phrase that we use that extroverted intuition thinks outside the box and introverted intuition thinks about the box. But sometimes you need to think outside the box, right? For problem solving and for innovation. There's also a lot of value in brainstorming, and not just brainstorming to get to the first viable idea and then moving, but the energy that gets created in a brainstorming session can usually create unexpected opportunities and unexpected directions, and to be open to that. And then finally, connecting disparate ideas for synergy. Like there might be a lot of synergistic outcomes that end up, as opposed to taking resource, maximizing resources or observing team potential. The exploration function sees things as they could be. It's kind of it's a very optimistic function, and it tends to see things, sort of see the best. And so there's a lot of value in bringing that energy to a team and bringing that energy to other people that you're working with.
I think with so much disruption and so much change right now, for an ENFJ or ENTJ to have access to this and be able to not suppress it in the shadow, but bring it up, I can see this being very valuable in a career. And there's so much change you have to attune to. So let's apply this now. The two examples I'm sure you
Mhm.
brought prepared. Let's talk about ENFJs and ENTJs. Let's start with ENFJs.
Okay.
What's an example of this energy showing up in an ENFJ's life?
So what if you've got an ENFJ that's a team leader and working on a project that's starting to stagnate a little bit,
Okay.
maybe even kind of bring the team down, and the extroverted feeling or harmony recognizes the team is being brought down, but doesn't necessarily know what to do about it.
Need some new ideas.
Needs new ideas. By empowering a team to brainstorm and actually listening to those ideas and feeling heard, as opposed to just, like it being a show of it, but actually having people come up with good ideas and then honoring them for it and listening and possibly, entertaining some of them. It reinvigorates momentum. It might reinvigorate sort of the team feeling like a togetherness where the lead can then take them to like the next place because they feel that sense of effervescence.
Yeah. What about ENTJs?
So in ENTJ, I've chosen an educational program designer for ENTJ that could use this function to imagine interactive, engaging exhibits that appeal to both children and adults. So something that actually cross-pollinates all sorts of age groups. And then using that to creatively combine technology, storytelling, maybe making sort of this educational program a lot more interactive and engaging and something that's outside the box in order to bring in a more diverse audience.
I can imagine an ENFJ or ENTJ listening right now going, this sounds like a nightmare. Like I have my plans.
Yeah.
I know what the group needs and I know what the business or my career needs, or I know what fill in the blank. And I've got the vision. I've done a lot of research and thinking, and I've got the vision in front of me. And now it's about executing on that vision. And you want me to disrupt and hijack my own career plans, job, leadership, or whatever's happening.
Yeah.
To go wide on random throwing spaghetti at the wall ideas. Like that sounds disruptive, chaotic. I will lose control. I could just hear the ENJ telling themselves this right now. Like, I'm not going to listen to what you talk about, Antonia. There's no value in this.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm being hyperbolic and I'm over dramatizing.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some resistance here potentially and not want to integrate this part of the shadow.
Yeah. ENJs usually see extroverted intuition as distracting or impractical. And so they usually don't invite a lot of it.
Yeah.
But if an ENJ is already using this function and they're already being influenced by it in a career context, and that could look like catastrophizing, or it could look like getting to the end of something that isn't working and then just getting almost desperate for any idea. So if you bring the timeline of using that function a little earlier, like in a conscientious or conscious way, then there's a lot of benefits that come from it. It's yet another tool. And particularly when an EJ is in a position of leadership, if they happen to be. Now, not every ENJ is, but if they happen to be, one of the things that the function brings the energy of is a team coming more alive. Like it energizes people. This is an energizing function, and not just in getting things done, but also feeling like you've got a say, feeling like, you're inputting ideas and that people care about what like what you've been brewing. And for team members, a lead that takes their ideas seriously or gives them an opportunity to say all of the ideas. Like, I mean, you're tapping a resource there of people who come day in and day out that might be seeing things that you're not seeing, spotting trends, spotting opportunities, spotting new innovations, or just ideas that you hadn't taken into consideration. So it's actually a wellspring of good things, right? Like that optimistic energy, that up feeling, that effervescence. And so even if you're not a big fan of using it for yourself, most people have at least a couple team members that really get activated by it. And so making sure that it's a part of your career. And again, it's like sometimes life just doesn't let you run a clean simulation. Sometimes things get disrupted. And if you are unsure what to do, if you had this like perfect vision all set up and then it got derailed, there's an intuitive function right there waiting for you to use it in order to come up with new ideas, innovative ideas to pivot.
But what I'm hearing you say too, though, or what we're both saying, but you're the primary one doing it, is that don't wait for it to be responsive, reactive when everything goes bad. There's an opportunity to bring that way forward and have it be proactively involved in some of the ways that you do whatever, fill in the blank.
Yeah, because when we're talking about a shadow function, if we're only using it when, things get really desperate, we haven't built the skill of integration. We haven't built the skill of inviting it in. We're still used to using it in a very sort of dogmatic way. We either push it away and don't see its value, or we use it in a very, like you said, Jonathan called it a bully. So that's the relationship we build with it. And not to pick on Jonathan, but I think we all kind of feel that way about our sixth function, is that it feels like a bully. And that's very common. Yep. So if we can bring it a little earlier and then go, okay, so I do have this reactionary response to the function, but that might not be the function's fault. So how am I actually using it? Again, it's listening to it. It's recognizing how it's showing up already and how you respond to it when it shows up in a way that you're not expecting.
Yeah.
And then go, okay, that's me. That's my relationship to it. How do I build a better relationship with it early so that when I need it, when it's the right tool for the job, I'm not just autopilot or auto responding, pushing it away. I'm actually inviting it in and allowing it to, be effective in my life.
All right, let's talk about extroverted sensing or sensation as a sixth function in the 8 function stack. So this is going to be the sixth cognitive function for all ESTJs and ESFJs. So the ESJs in the Myers-Briggs system. And we look at the co-pilot or auxiliary cognitive function for ESJs. It's introverted sensing. That's its technical name. Memory is the nickname we've given it. And so if you flip that introverted sensing to extroverted sensing at the sixth function, that's sensation. And that's how we get there. That's how the math works. What is this is a function that's got a lot of energy to it, a lot of vivaciousness, direct action. This is a really cool function. How does it show up for ESFJs and ESTJs?
So it's just kind of like the opposite of ISP types that do have a preference for being in the moment. ESJs like things a little bit more predictable than that. They like the tried and true a little bit more. They like to notice details over time. They like tracking. That might not be their favorite thing, but it definitely makes them feel more safe. It makes them feel like they know what's going, as long as they can reference to what has happened before and they can watch themselves, have had built career capital over time, they feel good. Extroverted sensing or sensation requires a little bit more situational awareness. It requires you to be a little bit more reactive and responsive in the moment, which means that you can use it when things aren't going to plan. In the same way that ENJs can use extroverted intuition or exploration when their vision doesn't work out and maybe they can have a few more ideas as a plan B or C. When ESJ types aren't able to plan their environment the way they want, and something happens that's disruptive in their environment, this allows them to react and respond in real time.
In a tangible, direct action way. Mm-hmm. Because the other part of them too, their tenure or tertiary is going to be extroverted intuition. Mm-hmm. That's going to be more ideation responsiveness. So if new ideas are required, that part of them might show up. But if action is required, particularly direct action, this sixth function would become more important at that moment.
Yep, exactly. And usually opportunities require us to jump on them immediately, to not wait on them, to not allow, I think a lot of times, and I would even say this as somebody who uses introverted sensing or memory as my fourth or inferior function. It's like sometimes I see an opportunity and I just assume it's going to wait for me. And I'm like, well, I'll figure out how to engage or interact with it. And then suddenly the opportunity is gone.
Yeah, me too.
So this is a function that helps ESJs jump on opportunities as they present themselves in the moment. So it encourages action over, sort of over the theory of it, over that's an opportunity. So let's study it and prepare for it and figure out what we're going to do. It's sometimes you just got to get to it right this moment. It also helps with on-the-ground leadership. As you mentioned before, EJ types, they tend to be in positions of responsibility. Not always, not all the time, but that's a tendency. They have a tendency to enjoy management. And extroverted sensing or sensation allows them to be more visible on the ground, more a part of the action. And so it allows them to, do things like boost morale, that people see them working with them, see them doing, leading by example, not just from an office. It also helps with immediate resolution of issues. So if you actually do have an emergency, or you do have something that's happening right now that was not predicted, that maybe you don't have a precedent for, maybe you haven't seen it before, sometimes you just have to take action and figure it out in the moment. So it allows that energy of taking care of things immediately and not allowing them to spiral out of control even bigger. So it's the function that helps you quickly identify urgent matters. If something's an emergency, you can go handle it. And then it also kind of promotes some healthy competition, right? It allows the challenge of the moment, goal setting in the moment, doing things immediate as opposed to over time. Extroverted sensing is also attuned to how people are experiencing you. So it allows for some healthy competition, but it also allows for a softening, an ability to present as a certain kind of character or persona, or the kind of person that engages with people in real life. And so that helps an ESxJ type be aware of how people are experiencing them a little bit more, or at least understand a little bit more about how they're impacting and affecting their environment.
So there's going to be a difference between how this shows up for each of the types, ESFJ or ESTJ. And we can talk about that. You have some examples you could share, or hypotheticals.
Yeah.
These aren't real world examples.
Yeah.
They're hypothetical examples
Right.
of how it might look. So let's talk about ESTJ first. Like, how would this look?
Well, it's not going to look all that different, but I do have an example for each, just to be a little bit more like, because again, people are almost like, can you give me an example? And I figured, especially with sixth function, shadow work, all of this stuff, people are like, what are you even talking about?
Oh, yeah.
So I thought examples would be good. So for an ESTJ, I chose a real estate agent. So how would extroverted sensing or sensation help an ESTJ in a real estate agency? Well, it would help them quickly read clients' reactions to homes that they're viewing, right? So how are they reacting and responding to this home? Should I waste time having them walk through all of it? Now that we've driven up to the house, are they already open to it, or by reading body language?
Oh, yeah.
Or are they like not into this? And so maybe we shouldn't waste time doing this.
Also the setting. Kind of the physical environment and setting, the energy of the setting, and kind of how it looks and the look and feel of it. That could really help a real estate agent.
Yep, exactly. And so do they need to adjust their sales pitch? Do they need to, talk about, making sure that they understand the client's unspoken preferences? Maybe their body language is communicating that. What are the things that are catching their eye? And how can we speed up decision making, right? And go like, is this the home you want? Great, let's close it, right? So it might really assist somebody in that kind of context with, it's just speeding things up and closing things more efficiently.
Well, let's talk about the real estate agents that are real. They're all ESFJs.
Yeah,
right? No, I'm kidding. What's the example for ESFJ?
Actually, I chose something different for them.
I know.
So for an ESFJ, let's talk about it like an event manager.
Okay.
So maybe they're overseeing a high profile event. And they're recognizing just little things like how things are set up are making it more difficult for the party goers to walk through a space. If it's like, no, we always have the table set up in a certain way, but then that makes it more difficult and awkward for you could call it the feng shui of the room, right? Like people are having difficulty navigating around. Then in the moment, extroverted sensing or sensation would jump in and just handle the situation, right? Like, okay, well, let's move it around. Let's take action. Let's make it so that it's a little nicer for the people who are actually at this event. And then it could also be like, quickly tuning into what people need to have a better experience. We already talked about ensuring smooth traffic flow, but it could also be like, where are we at with drinks? Where are we at with food? Are things coming out at the time that they need to, right? And then just being responsive and quickly responsive to making sure that everybody has a really good time.
So actually, weirdly enough, I talked about resistances and reluctance about the other types. I actually see ESJs embracing the things you just talked about, those examples of kind of being attuned to the environment as a real estate agent or the party or the atmosphere. Usually when you give the examples, I go, man, that's something I think the person would reject or push away if that was their sixth function. But these seem like these would be welcomed and very much beneficial. So it's interesting. I don't see a lot of resistance maybe obviously here. Like I think somebody listening right now that has ESJ preference will go, yeah, I could totally see that. I could see the benefit of that.
Yeah.
So where's the darkness? Where's the shadow? What's the resistance? If it seems like on paper at least, this would totally work for an ESTJ or ESFJ, this energy, why would they possibly resist it with their shadow?
Yeah. Well, sometimes this function feels impulsive.
Okay.
Sometimes it feels like you're getting away from a standard. So if there's a way that we've always done it before,
Like
and
a
it's
shortcut?
always like it feels like a shortcut.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I'm cutting corners.
Mhm.
So if I do that, it makes the traffic flow, but I'm cutting corners and maybe it's going to collapse something bigger.
Or maybe I'm communicating to the staff or my team that they are allowed to move things around quickly. And I really don't want to set that precedent, right?
Yeah.
It's like what you're doing is you're taking an action now and not thinking about how it's going to impact a long-term precedent. And so that can feel impulsive and it can feel a little irresponsible. And so that might be why there's a reluctance.
Okay.
But at the same time, there's also sometimes a need to be okay with that, right? And be okay, not worry about setting a precedent for eternity because you're changing things around to have a more efficient outcome. So it's a matter of recognizing that both, like it's still important to consider precedents, but also sometimes you just have to be flexible.
Yeah. Anything else about this function before we move on?
Yeah, well, so there's also the question of like what happens when an ESJ doesn't integrate, right? Like what's the missed opportunity if they don't integrate this part of themselves? Well, it means that when there are inefficiencies, when there are opportunities to improve things in the moment, when there are opportunities that can be jumped on, all of those will be missed. If there is a rigid insistence that things go just a certain way from your second function of introverted sensing or memory, or if there's just a desire to keep things at a certain tempo, no matter what's happening around you, you are going to miss opportunities. And so it will come out later when maybe things aren't going well, and then you're just taking wildly stabbing any action, kind of like an ENJ might do with extroverted intuition or exploration. But if you bring that flexibility a little earlier, if you bring a willingness to change things up a little bit earlier, then you're less likely to run into that later.
So let's talk about the final function here today. We've talked about the 3 perceiving functions. We've left introverted intuition or perspectives till the very end. Now, this is going to be the 6th function for INFPs and INTPs in the Myers-Briggs system. So INPs are going to use this. And the reason why this is their 6th function, if you look at their co-pilot or auxiliary second function, both INTPs and INFPs use extraverted intuition or exploration as the way that they perceive their world. They move through the world this way. This is their parent function. This is the auxiliary co-pilot. You flip the attitude from extraverted intuition to introverted intuition for the 6th function for both of these types. So let's talk a little bit about what does this look like qualitatively for INFPs and INTPs to tune into the 6th function energy of perspectives or introverted intuition.
So extroverted intuition or exploration is really good at in the moment, coming up with creative ideas in the moment.
This is their co-pilot.
Yeah,
this is their strength.
Yeah. And it's very optimistic and it's very, like, let's just try it, guys. Let's just see what will happen.
Yeah.
And
let's wing it.
Let's wing it and see what, or just like a willingness to take risks and chances.
Yeah.
This requires an INP to be a little more future paced. It requires them to, as opposed to just stab at things and try them and see what happens and be optimistic about the outcome, to actually envision an outcome and to see things with a more long-term perspective. So it's not just like following and pursuing interests. That's oftentimes what INPs are doing, is they're just following and pursuing their interests. This has more of a visioning into the future in order to commit to a single path.
I was just talking to an INFP friend, colleague of mine, who is in a situation right now in their career where they committed to a work relationship, but they didn't run the simulation far enough into the future. They just like, yeah, let's figure it out. Let's just do it. And unfortunately, they created a dynamic where it's pulling way too much on them. Like they're working, it's kind of like an open-ended kind of retainer experience.
Right.
And they're just working and working and working, and they don't have a lot of good boundaries because they didn't realize where this was going to go. They just got excited about the opportunity, but they didn't look at the long timeline of what was going to be required of them. And now they're having to reevaluate.
Right.
And basically look at the timeline and go, okay, where is this going to head if I keep down this road?
Yeah.
But it's coming in now months later after the arrangement's already been made.
Right. That's a great example because that shows the need for boundary setting and limitations. And introverted intuition or perspectives helps an INP with that, with boundary setting.
Well, but from the INFP standpoint, just getting the opportunity and getting carbonated and going for it, that's like the first step of growth often.
Right.
Right. Like don't just sit and wait, get into action, make things happen, try things. And so that's good advice. But now what the sixth function can come in to help with is when you try something and you get yourself into oh no, you can start to weave that in to run simulations to see, is this a good opportunity for me too? Not just an opportunity I need to take action on.
Exactly. So the first one that I'd like to mention is developing future-oriented strategies that make sure that today's actions build towards tomorrow's goals. Yeah. And so it's not just taking opportunity, although that's good. It's also like, okay, now I also have to make sure that it's part of my long-term strategy.
And it's a phase. It's like phase 1, phase 2. Because if you skip straight to this before you start getting into a lot of actions, you might talk yourself out of the growth for yourself as an INP. Right.
This is not about staying with, say, the 10-year-old or tertiary of introverted sensing or memory, right? None of this, even though those are similar functions, none of this is about... It's actually about not skipping your second function and going to your third. It's using your second function and then also using your sixth function to support it. That's actually the dynamic. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Another way an INP can do what you're talking about is also like identifying underlying trends. So in certain cases, it's about staying ahead of trends, being proactive, keeping people, like kind of watching for what's coming down the line and making sure that your efforts are in alignment with that, but also your company's efforts are. Like you can watch underlying trends in your own industry and make sure that you're ahead of the game while you're also coming up with creative ideas on how to do that. Remember, you're not abandoning your second function. You're just bringing your sixth function in.
It's very important.
Right. Very much. And I'm glad that you mentioned it in this one because you can kind of see how those work in conjunction with each other for INPs a lot. It's also about encouraging purpose-driven thinking. So it's not just pursuing interests and not just pursuing like the thing that's capturing your attention, but it's also a drive for like, well, what's the meaning of everything I'm doing anyway? And having an overarching meaning, even if this job that you have right now is not necessarily the thing you want to be doing, if it is a step along the road of your overarching plan, if it's part of your purpose and why you're doing things, it's a little easier to deal with a job that is not as fascinating if you know that it's one of the steps. It's like one stop. It's the next lily pad, and that's not the end. And so then you don't feel stuck. And there's also an ability to adapt to unforeseen changes. So while extroverted intuition is the ability to see lots of different potentials and to be flexible in this way, if you have unforeseen changes, but you prepare an organization for all of those potentials. So it's not just having an idea ready, but it's actually preparing, right? It's like it's getting ready just in case you have to go to plan B. That's part of how introverted intuition comes in, right? It's not just going like, well, we'll have an idea when we get there. It's like, well, let's prepare for plan B just in case. And then you've got, you've got some flexibility there as well.
Yeah.
And then it's also like sort of synthesizing insights into plans. So it's not just your extroverted intuition, like having an inspiration and going with it, but it's also having a single vision that you're infusing into everything else that you're doing.
Yeah. I gave an example for INFPs, but I'd love to hear what yours was. Let's do two examples, one for INFP, and these are hypotheticals, and one for INTP. What would this maybe look like for each of the two types?
Yeah. So I chose a graphic designer for an INFP and how using introverted intuition would help for branding, right? A branding project so that you understand what the client's missions and values are, what they want to, ultimately communicate.
The symbols to use.
The symbols to use, exactly.
Yeah.
And combining all of those insights into emerging design trends. So it's like, it's it's marrying the company and what they stand for with also how your, what your design aesthetic is, but also where the design aesthetic is going. So like you mentioned, symbols, logos, it gives it a distinctive feel, but also a forward looking feel.
I think you'd help with framing too, how you frame a concept or an idea and you package it. So packaging and framing, this could come in to help with that in a career or a job.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
What about INTPs?
So for INTPs, I chose a high school coach, right? Because I've actually had a lot of INTPs that I know that work in high schools. So a high school coach that analyzes patterns in the team's past performances, but applies introverted intuition to predict potential weaknesses. So like adjusting training techniques based on those insights, enhancing the team's strategy, positioning players in ways that best leverage their strengths for future games, teaching people things like the concept of going towards what did Wayne Gretzky call it? Skate to where the puck is going, and to be able to use introverted intuition as a way to not just try a bunch of stuff, but also set an insight, like make sure that those insights are being played out in how the team is practicing.
I can see a little bit of resistance here from INFPs or INTPs with this perspective, the sixth function, because identity is strong for INPs. Like whether it's that introverted feeling identity or even an introverted thinking, there's a strong sense of like, I have the right way to see this. And my subjective reality is very strong. And for INPs, I think it's extremely self-evident to them, like their perspective and what they value and hold. So I can imagine that personal part of it, having to get out of yourself and shift into somebody else's perspective or framing, it's not like you can't do it, but it doesn't feel natural. It's not as fun than to stay with what your own subjective judging criteria is in a situation. And also it feels slow and sluggish, and it's going to shut off the fast ideation.
Yeah.
It feels like you have to commit to it more.
Yes.
And the fast ideation with your co-pilot or auxiliary function feels more fun and more carbonated, and it's so much more available and it's more playful. And this feels more serious, and I feel sluggish and slow, and I feel like I have to commit to something. And I think that's going to be a resistance for INTPs and INFPs.
Yeah, well, it means that you can't just endlessly ideate, or you can't endlessly, test iterate. It's like at some point you have to ship. At some point you have to stop just working on the thing, and it has to be like a set thing, and it has to go, right? And not that introverted intuition is the only function that can communicate that, but I think if you're just kind of in the energy of the moment, and especially if you're focusing on something that you're personally interested in or something that's kind of fascinating to you, it's hard to get yourself to go, okay, but I'm not playing here. This is like a career, right? I need to like take an action.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to take an action, what's the best action I can take into the future? And maybe I need to, I've had friends who have had trouble putting projects forward because it means that they have to stop retooling it.
You have to pick one frame and stick with it.
That's right. They have to pick one thing and stick with it and just kind of go with it. And so the reluctance is, like you mentioned, the reluctance is that you end up, it feels like you're limiting yourself, but actually you're setting yourself up to get the fruits of your labor.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing. And then if an INP doesn't do this, right, if they don't listen to this part of themselves and choose to disown and ignore it, what they end up doing is they end up finding the world passing them by. And that includes like if they work for a company that needs them to have their finger on the pulse of emerging trends and where things are going. It's the bitter pill to swallow for NP types to all of a sudden be irrelevant, right? And to go, wait, I thought I was forever young and I guess I'm irrelevant now. And now this is the direction everything's going. And without any introverted intuition that said, yeah, actually that's how things happen, right? Things pass you by and you have to look into the future on how things are changing. And you can't just sort of be interested in what you're interested in right now. You actually have to set yourself up for something stable that goes in, like that you build now, and then you get the fruits of your labor, later. Then an INP might find themselves in a pretty bad situation where they might be the most creative person in the world, but they're not getting any of the rewards of that.
So what we're talking about here is pretty detailed and advanced material. And I think you listening right now can handle it fine. We had some question marks in the day, like, can people handle going all the way into the 8 function shadow material? And while there is a bunch to see here, don't freak out if it's like way over, like if you're having trouble holding on to some of these ideas and you're like, man, I just figured out what my 4-letter code is. Now you're talking about 6 functions and archetypal energies and which cynic stuff. It's like, it can be a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, so much so that we developed an entire shadow work program, our Personality Life Path Mentorship, which goes through all of the 8 functions and it ties it to your specific life. So we do it live over 8 weeks. We look at each function and your relationship to it. We give you exercises to go test that in your real life. And then we do a 3 or 4 day event where we connect it to a systems map of your life so you know what to do about it all, right? But it's like a whole thing, and people have had transformations with this by seeing how their shadow material is showing up for them. And it's interesting to see. There's some patterns, but also there's a lot of uniqueness in how this shows up for people. But I recommend, if you really want to go down the road of shadow work, that's the program to tune into. So wherever offering it, if you're listening to this and we're offering at the time you're listening to this, take advantage of that. It could change your life. It's fairly involved though. It's like a big program. It takes a lot to invest in and be involved in. So you may just want to start with an owner's manual for your personality type. Just talking about the first things you have to do. Even before you get to the 6th function, we talked a lot about the co-pilot. I mean, that's the starting place for a lot of people to start developing that. That's a translator between some of the best parts of who you are and some of the uncertain parts of yourself. And it can be a great avenue for growth, just like we talked about with the IP types in this episode here, or INTP and INFP just a minute ago, when I said, just getting into that alone is a big step. And then you're asking them to go into the 6th function afterward.
Right.
So clearly you're on a timeline of development in your life. Don't skip steps. You don't need to jump to the 6th function if you're not ready for it. You can do with what you have available to you right now and start there. So if you're interested in that starting place, again, head over to personalityhacker.com, get the owner's manual for your personality type. It'll show you how to get into flow, work on that co-pilot, get out of trauma looping, deal with your personality grips and what your aspiration would be. There's a how to build an ideal day exercise in there so you can take your type and start to connect it to a real practical way of living your day-to-day. It's a fantastic place. Again, and while you're there at personalityhacker.com, getting your owner's manual for your personality type, leave a comment or ask a question or share your story under this episode. We want to hear what's coming up for you. It's been me and Antonia here. You haven't had a microphone, but we'd love to hear what's coming up as you're tuning in. Maybe you're one of the types we just covered and you have one of these functions as your 6th function. Are you resonating with this? Is this something that feels like you have availability for it? Is this something that's going to be down the road for you because you're doing other work? Come over and make your voice heard. Yeah.
So this is the second of the 3-part series. We just went through the perceiving functions as a 6th function. And then the next episode, we'll talk about the judging functions as a 6th function. Yeah. So that's
going to get real next.
Actually, I think it's easier to talk about the judging functions as a 6th function for career. So we probably, it was good for us to do this one first.
Well, let's wrap this blessing up and get to that one.
And I do want to make a mention, and I'm so glad you mentioned, or you said it earlier, Joel, it's, this is not a replacement for your 2nd or auxiliary function.
Yeah.
This is a support for it. So in career, you want to already be using your auxiliary or co-pilot function. And this is part of what supports that, as opposed to undermining it. Because again, you're using it no matter what. Is it something that you're aware of and you're using it to beautify all of it? Or is it something you're unaware of and it's kind of messing you up? So that's a good thing to remember too, before we get to the 3rd one. And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or a variety of different platforms. If you leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, that helps me out a lot psychologically and emotionally, because then I know people are actually listening and they're enjoying it, and we can keep going because I'm not all dystamic and sad. And you might be watching us on YouTube because we also have a video podcast. If you haven't checked it out yet, you should come over to YouTube and see if we've got, I don't know, maybe we have faces made for radio. I don't know. But we do have a podcast that you can watch if that is your preference. And then you can also leave a comment, ask a question there, and then subscribe, and hit the bell for future episodes.
My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker Podcast.